Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Development Control Committee on Thursday the 4th, 2023 of May. I will read out now the Chairman's statement, and then we will move on from that. Can I welcome all members and officers to this meeting of the Development Control Committee, which will be held as a hybrid meeting. The meeting will be recorded and will be available via the Council website to be viewed as soon as practical following the meeting. Everyone participating in this meeting will be accessing this meeting either from the Council chamber or from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or on silent mode, please. I'm just making sure mine's done. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their microphones and where remote, their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that with the expectation of myself as chairperson at other times, you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimize any background noise and interference and ensure the connections remain as stable as possible. Whether in the chamber or remote, if members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen at the top right hand side of your Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in order I receive requests. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The chat button is disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphones until I invite you to do so. Officers of Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of the microphones throughout the meeting, and when necessary will mute those not being used. In the event of a vote, officers from Democratic Services will announce the names of members present in turn who will vote for or against or abstain. The legal officer then will announce the results of the vote. I will also ask officers to introduce themselves as and when they're invited to speak during the course of this meeting. They should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use, please. I will now go to the agenda business. And the first one on the agenda is apologies for absence. I've had Councillor Richard Collins give his apologies for this morning. Any other apologies? Councillor Clark?
I noticed, Chair, that Councillor Della Hughes is having difficulty in joining.
Okay. Oh, no, she's on the main screen now. Are you with us, Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, sorry, it was slow connected. I'm not new now yet.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think, Mark, you've said that everybody's here?
All members here.
Yeah, okay, so there's just one. Oh, Councillor Kern?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have to leave about 1 o'clock. All right, Chair. Apologies.
You're getting that in early then, Councillor Kern?
I get it in early.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. Okay, number 2, any declarations of interest from any members, please? Well, let's go with Councillor Pratt, and then I'll come to you, Rich.
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item 8, same as before, personal, as the ward member and my residence is adjacent to the site on Birch Walk.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Williams, please.
Apologies, my little hand isn't working. Yes, the item relating to Pencoed Primary School, I have a long association with that school over 20 years. Although I'm not a governor there now, I think that would be a prejudicial interest in my view.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. It's noted. Any other body got declared interest? No? Okay, thank you for that. Site visits will be on Wednesday, the 14th to the 6th, 23. Everybody happy with that? Okay, moving on then. Number 4, to approve the minutes of the 23rd of the 3rd, 23. Could somebody formally move in second, please? Second. Thank you. All in favour? Okay, thank you. There's no public speakers this morning. We've all had the amendment sheet, I hope, or seen the amendment sheet anyway. Yeah? Okay, that's just for noting. Turnover. Development guidance, that's just for noting. So we'll come to number 8, P22588RLX, St. John's School, Newton Puth Call. And I take it, Phil, can I hand that over to you, please?
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, I'm Phil Thomas, Principal Planning Officer and Case Officer for this application. Members will recall that this application was considered by committee at the meeting held on the 23rd of March, but was deferred to allow officers to seek further clarification from the developer regarding the depth of soil and its suitability for tree planting and the scope for additional landscaping. Members also wanted the developer to discuss community contributions, including tree planting with Porthcawl Town Council, but outside the planning process. The Environmental Dimension Partnership, on behalf of Taylor Wimpey, have submitted a response that considers the issues of additional tree planting on site and a review of the implementation of the landscape works undertaken thus far. Regarding the quality of the implemented works, Dunn Landscapes, who undertook the landscaping works, have confirmed that the specification for tree and hedge planting, as detailed on the approved landscaping drawings, has been followed. EDP, in their statement, have also drawn attention to Condition 12 of the consent, which requires the replacement of any trees that are removed, uprooted, destroyed, or die, or become, in the opinion of the LPA, seriously damaged or defective, that there will be a requirement to plant another tree of the same species and size as that originally planted. And within a 5-year period, members may note a change on the amendment sheet in that regard. EDP do not consider there to be any material concerns in respect of the quality and implementation of the landscape proposals, and that they've been undertaken in accordance with the approved drawings. EDP report reminds us that under the original permission, a significant number of trees were to be removed for arboricultural reasons and others to facilitate the development. Extensive new planting with a total of 83 new trees and 728 shrubs were proposed and implemented to mitigate for the loss, and they formed the approved landscaping scheme for the development. It is the view of EDP that the majority of actions are either in line with the previously consented arboricultural works or have been undertaken for reasons of sound arboricultural good practice, largely due to the effects of ash dieback disease, which has spread across the site and indeed across much of South Wales in the time since the original survey work was undertaken on this site. Members should note that the tree survey that accompanied this application has been further amended and proposes further works along the eastern boundary of the site. That's referenced in the table on pages 19 to 15 of the report, and regrettably covers further ash dieback and elm disease on that part of the site. EDP acknowledge, on behalf of Taylor Wimpey, that certain actions, such as the removal of trees in G5, have been due to unconsented disturbance of the root protection areas. Overall, an additional 8 trees have been removed beyond those consented under the previous applications. In response to ash dieback, the unauthorised loss of trees, and the concerns of the Council, an updated landscaping scheme has been prepared to show additional tree planting comprising a total of 8 additional new trees located within the public realm and incidental landscape areas around the site. These additional planting are considered adequate mitigation, especially given that the losses were incurred due to sound arboricultural reasons in the main. In terms of the scope of community contributions, it is the developer's view the revised landscaping proposals that provides the additional 8 trees on site, in addition to the extensive tree planting already undertaken, fully mitigates the effect of the development. But that doesn't prevent the developers undertaking and go through discussions with the Town Council and the local member outside of the planning process. Members, the committee report has been updated to include the late representations that we received that were included on the amendment sheet for the last committee meeting. So in brief, the application proposes a variation of the condition imposed on the earlier consent and to agree a revised programme of tree works and landscaping proposals. In your report, a table has been included that identifies the individual tree and groups of tree with reference to the previously agreed programme of tree works and those proposed on the tree report that has accompanied this application. That table has been amended to cover the additional detailed survey work that's been carried out on the eastern boundary of the site. The tree numbers and the text in bold identifies the trees that are to be removed under this submission. Members will note the comments of the local member and the concerns that have been expressed by the number of residents. Members, in conclusion, this application is recommended for approval again on the basis that the revised tree report and programme of works are acceptable on arboricultural grounds. Furthermore, the revised landscaping proposals which seek to compensate for the loss of trees on site are also acceptable. The developer's concerns of residents and others regarding tree loss and poor working practices on the part of the developers are justified in part, but as I said previously, any action in this regard would take place outside the scope of the application. The tree loss that resulted from a failure to implement the correct working practices for the development around trees has impacted, as we said previously, to some degree on the amenities of the area, but that will be mitigated in part through the new tree planting. The recommendation is set out on page 20 of the report, and the list of conditions follow on. As I said earlier, I just need to draw your attention to the amendment sheet, and the proposed changes to the wording of a number of conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Can somebody move the officer's recommendation second, please?
I move second.
Thank you. All in favour? Right. Anybody want to speak on it? Yeah. Councillor Griffiths?
Thank you very much, Chair. It's really not on this specific one. I thank officers for doing actually a good job on trying to move this forward. So thank you very much for your efforts on this. I think large-scale developments like this, where there have been problems with the developers, are something that we need to be very wary of in the future. And one of the suggestions I'd like officers to consider is whether we can, for example, take and this is in respect of the personnel problems and challenges that we have at the moment within our development control officers, where we know that we're understaffed. I do wonder whether there's a possibility that for these large-scale developers we can put a requirement on the developers themselves to employ somebody on our behalf who actually looks after the site and makes sure that the conditions especially during the build on the site, are actually adhered to. Because I think the problem here was that the developer has failed to monitor their own workers on their own site. So my suggestion is, would it be possible, for example, for the developers, as part of the original conditions, to make a contribution so that an independent surveyor or whatever person that could do that job could then visit the site every couple of days, check everything that is in place, and then report back to us as a planning authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. We're just sorting out who's going to reply to you. Phil? Or Rod? Rod's going to reply to you.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, Councillor. Sorry, it's only my left arm that's on the camera. Here we go. Yes, it's the age-old problem. We approve plans. We make it clear which plans we approve. They give those plans to the developer, and in an ideal world, they follow the plans to the letter of the law. And if they don't, we do have the option of enforcement action and issuing breach of condition notices on that basis. The unfortunate thing is, as we've seen, even with renowned companies like Taylor Wimpey, mistakes do happen, and we can remedy that, and sometimes it's very difficult to remedy. In this instance, it's been quite easy because it's not as if they've developed more of the site. They've just taken down trees that they were not meant to take down, and they've replaced those. So, but introducing something into it, we talked about Section 160s yesterday in the training, introducing another contribution to arrange or pay for an independent clerk of works. I've never heard of that before, but it might be something that we can impress upon developers that it is worth their while doing. I think in this instance, there was a lack of experience on site, not from the council's end, from the developer's end, and that allowed these sort of mistakes to happen. But We can review that and probably factor that into some of our pre-application responses to these major developments and suggest it strongly for their benefit more than anything to avoid any issues further down the line. And perhaps we can do it that way and instill that process. Thank you, Chair. Perhaps I should have said, for the purposes of the recording, I'm Roger Davis, Development and Building Control Manager. Thank you, Chair. I think John wants to.
Yeah, John, do you want to come in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thanks. For the purpose of the recording, my name is Jonathan Parsons, Group Manager for Planning and Development Services. Rodri's quite comprehensive response there. Just to add to that, I think what we've got to be mindful of is impartiality when we are using third parties to look at sites and investigate any potential breaches of planning control. So we've got to be very mindful of that. But one thing that we are seeking to do going forward for major schemes, major developments, are what's known as planning performance agreements. Now, this is an agreement between the authority and the developer. This is completely separate to the Section 106 process, and this will potentially provide some income for the authority to employ expertise where it's actually lacking within the authority, or we can assign existing staff and then backfill those staff. So what Councillor Griffiths has raised is quite a good and interesting point, and that's something that we would like to address going forward. Certainly with the bigger sites that are coming through with the new LDP. But yeah, in this day and age, and the point was quite well made that we are short-staffed, and we've got to look at every avenue and every possibility to ensure that the developments are carried out in accordance with the approved plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to see that the period for replanting for dead or trees and foliage that hasn't established has been extended from 3 years to 5 years. I hope that will be the norm in planning applications going forward. I mean, I would say especially in Porthcawl because of the very, very inclement weather, and it's surprising how many trees, etc., do not establish straight away, so need to be replanted. Would the 5 years, if there's already been replanting, would the 5 years extend to those that have been already replanted? And who in the future is going to monitor if trees or shrubs fail? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor, and thank you also because you did bring to our attention this issue regarding the timing of the replanting. So, as I said, that was addressed on the amendment sheet. I don't know where 3 years, because it is in certain conditions, 3 years was used, and I don't know why. I don't know, it's a bit of an arbitrary figure. 5 years, yes, I think that's reasonable. Developers will perhaps push against that because they don't want, they generally have the view of developing a site and moving to the next site to develop it and then moving, not wanting to go back. But ultimately, the condition says, well, I think it says when you plant the tree,
Or any tree planted in replacement.
Or any tree planted in replacement, you've got that extended period of time. So we've already got some tree planting has taken place. So by the virtue of the way that we've reworded the condition now, it would be 5 years from the date those trees were planted, not 3 years, because we've changed the wording of the condition. I think that would be right, Rod, because that's the new consent. And then any additional new planting that will go in, it'll be 5 years from the date that takes place. So there will be varying time frames. So that has its own difficulties in knowing exactly and precisely when the trees went in. But I think in terms of monitoring it, I'm afraid to some degree, it will be a case of watchful residents who have kept an eye on this development from day one, as the local member will testify. And I'm sure they will bring to our attention if they see failures, because it is a site that you would be able to walk through and walk out of. So I think where the planting will go in will be quite public. So I would imagine that if people see failures, they will be brought to our attention. And then, as Rodri said, we have powers to enforce, or certainly negotiate to start with the replanting and then enforce if that's not done. So that would be our intention, yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Martin Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Building on what Councillor Griffiths said and Jonathan's comment regarding performance plans, I can't remember exactly what the terminology was. Is there scope for us as a committee to impose conditions, reporting conditions, so something perhaps between the two, where when we have concerns about a development, for whatever reason, maybe because it's particularly sensitive or because there are particular public concerns, that we can impose conditions whereby the developer has to regularly report on adherence to conditions, or report on their, but basically report on their performance. And whilst in itself it may not hold them to account, it does give them another opportunity to prove they're doing the right thing. And if they're not doing the right thing, of course, then more recourse for us at a later point.
Thank you for that question. Rod?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, planning performance agreements is the sort of thing we'd enter into with developers, especially on the major strategic sites that will have come forward now with the LDP coming through. They're going to be very time consuming. We're going to have to allocate resources. We're going to have to be able to justify the allocation of limited resources to those schemes. They're going to take up a lot of time. So in those agreements, we can put something in effectively to get the agreement of the developer that they will do all they can to make sure that everything's done in accordance with the approved plans eventually. So, but in terms of reporting back, we could ask him for regular updates. I don't want to name names, but it's only as strong as what's put down on a piece of paper or on an email. Really, it's we'd still have to go out and check that. I suppose it's you know, we'd love to be able to trust every developer and trust every word they say, but without just double checking that is another matter. I think if we can do it through the obviously you've got the councillor portal route of asking our enforcement officer at the time. Hopefully eventually with our restructure we'll be able to get a couple more enforcement officers in place, and more to the point, hopefully we're going to get a conditions compliance officer or an officer who can deal with that element, so we can check up on developments that perhaps have started without complying with the necessary conditions, and those conditions that need an element of monitoring will be able to be monitored because we'll have a few more officers in place. So that's the plan. Hopefully recruitment will be possible, and we'll get some good candidates interested in those posts, and we can make that a way forward. So we, like you said, Councillor, we can be a bit more proactive rather than reactive to complaints, but very much so we'd still be reliant a bit on neighbouring occupiers to make sure that, because they're ears and eyes on the ground really, right next door to developments, and they can see things happening quicker than we can, and we can respond to that then. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Griffiths, Jonathan Parsons wants to come in just before you, so I'm going to call Jonathan Parsons and I'll come straight to you then, Councillor Griffiths. Jonathan?
Thanks, Chair. I think Rod, we summed up that situation quite well. I've got much to add to that, but a lot of our conditions do require the submission of monitoring reports as part of that condition. But as Rodri said, we ultimately the buck stops with us. We have to monitor the site, and hopefully going forward we'll be a little bit more proactive in that regard. But yeah, it's something we can certainly look at, and there will be lessons learned on previous developments, and we'll see that we can try and overcome those issues going forward. But yeah, ultimately it does rest it does rest with us, unfortunately, as the planning authority to actively monitor the sites. That's proving a bit difficult at the moment, especially when we've got a lot of development activity going on. But we'll try and improve that situation. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Apologies, Councillor Griffiths. You can now come in.
Okay, it's just one very small extra point, which is Mark Shepherd has spoken very frequently around putting responsibility back into the community for trying to build up our services and the cost of living. But I think that also applies to developers. And this is a case where we have to recognise that it's difficult for everybody, and developers actually have to support us in making sure that they comply. So I think in this particular case, there was no intent to do any damage. There was no attempt to to go around any enforcement or anything like that. It's simply better monitoring would have been better for the developer and better for us. So, and I think getting them to be good citizens, if you like, I think is the right approach, and it's actually in line with our corporate strategy as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Is there anybody? Can you? Is a legacy hand up, Councillor? Thank you. Right. Has anybody got any other questions? Nobody's indicating. Can somebody formally move then the office? Okay, right. All in favour?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. The next one on the agenda has been deferred. The Black Mill one has been deferred. Nora.
It actually mentions on the amendment sheet that a key neighbour, has not been consulted and invited to comment. I take it that this has the neighbour moved in recently? Why haven't they been consulted? Because I take it that this application seems to have been around since 2014.
Yes.
So why hasn't that key member of the public been consulted? Thank you.
We'll get that answer to you now.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, you're quite right. Application's been in since 2014, came to members in 2017. Since that time, believe it or not, there have been 2 or 3 iterations of the plan that have been subject to public consultation. The latest plan, for some reason, wasn't. It's not a property owner. It's one of the businesses nearby. So we feel it's important that they're also aware of it, because we've looked quite carefully at the issue of the relationship of the development with the businesses and with the residents. I won't say too much, obviously, because it's going to be discussed again. But just to assure you that letter has gone out yesterday, so they'll have an opportunity to comment on the plan there. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for that. Can I ask then, is the business a new business? Because I think I can remember actually going to this site meeting, and there was a business on the left-hand side, if I remember where we were standing. Is it a new business?
It's that very business you're talking about, yes. Yeah. Coppice.
It's the same business.
It's been many years, yeah. They've virtually taken over all of Ishpin Industrial Estate now. Coppice, it's called, yeah. Coppice.
Right, okay.
Okay, Councillor Clark? That's okay. We move on to item number 10 then. Pencoed Primary School. Ewan, are you going to put this through, please?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. For the purpose of the recording...
Hang on a second. Somebody's just leaving. Councillor Williams just wants to leave the meeting. Sorry, I do apologise. He's just declaring interest. Sorry, give him a chance to leave the meeting. Okay, carry on.
So, yeah, for the purposes of the recording, my name is Ewan Sexton, Senior Planning Officer. This application seeks planning consent for the erection of 6 floodlighting columns at an existing MUGA on the site of Pencoed Primary School. The floodlighting columns will each measure 10 metres in height, and they'll be situated on the northern side of the MUGA facing the south. The floodlights will allow extended use of the facility by the school as well as by the wider community in the evenings and on weekends. It's proposed that the MUGA will be utilised between 9 AM and 10 PM on weekdays and 9 AM and 7 PM on Saturdays, with slightly shortened hours of 10 AM till 6 PM on Sundays and bank holidays. The floodlights will obviously only be in use following sundown in the evenings, with timing severely then throughout the year. In line with ecological recommendations made by our in-house ecologists, the floodlighting column, which is situated nearest to the site's eastern boundary, will be fitted with a visor or hood, which will reduce the light spill on an area of woodland which sits immediately to the east of the MUGA. We received a couple of objections from two neighbouring residents, one to the east of the site and one to the south, and they have raised concerns relating to issues around light and noise pollution, as well as a loss of privacy and overshadowing from the floodlighting structures. You will have seen that all of these objections have been responded to within the officer's reports. We haven't received any objections from any statutory consultees, and that includes our environmental health officers and our ecologist. As I mentioned earlier, the columns measure 10 meters in height and the floodlights will be aimed down. So at this height and the angle, the floodlights will create a narrower beam, which results in less light spill. So the level of light spill and illuminance at the boundaries of the neighbouring properties surrounding the site are well below the maximum levels which are set out in general floodlighting guidance. We've included a couple of conditions on the plan consent to limit the operating hours of the floodlights to 10 PM on weekdays, as well as 7 PM on Saturdays and 4 PM on Sundays and bank holidays. There's also a condition which has been recommended by our ecologist for the floodlights to be turned off at 9 PM between May and September each year. And that is because that is the season when bats are most active. Hopefully that covers everything off. If you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Can somebody formally move the officer's recommendation with the amendment? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Does anybody have any questions of the officer? Councillor Griffiths? Councillor Griffiths?
Apologies, I forgot to put mute off. Thank you very much, Ewan. That's very clear in there. I just wondered whether there's a possibility of putting a timer as well as manual control on the floodlights, and so that they are forced off at the times that they are not allowed, in addition to the manual off. I don't know whether that's been considered or not.
It's a good point. To be honest, I'm not sure off the top of my head how the floodlights will be controlled. It may be that there's already a timer on them, or maybe they're manually controlled. Those details may have been submitted. There was quite a lot of detailed information, but I don't actually know whether that's already the case or not. I can have a look into that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to refuse or anything like that, but I think it would be helpful for us to advise them to put a timer on them so that they're not left on accidentally, or they're not misused.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Ewan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Well, it's been moved and seconded, and with the amendment from Councillor Griffiths to put a timer on there. Everybody in favour?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, thank you for that. Mike? Oh.
When people are approving, seconding, saying yes, and they're not putting their mics on, you don't not hear that when you're sitting at home or wherever you're sitting. Oh. So people aren't hearing that.
Right.
So people that are approving and seconding and saying yes, you know.
It's a good point, and it'll be done.
Quick fire, isn't it? Quick
Yeah.
fire.
Right. Right. Okay. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, we didn't hear, or I didn't hear any of that. I don't know whether the mics were on in the chamber, but I didn't hear any of it.
Oh, okay. Okay. In which context, Councillor Bennett, did you not hear the officer giving a speech? His report?
I can hear, I think, Councillor Clark in the background, but I don't know whether she's got her mic on, but I can't hear it. I don't know if anybody else online could hear it.
Well, basically what she was saying was, when proposals and seconders, they should be using their mics, and Councillor Barrow and the Vice Chair didn't use their mics. So in future, mics will have to be used. They're not. It has to be done that way. Just to apologise for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right. Item 11 then. Appeals. Rod, are you going to go through them? Or Jonathan? Oh, right. Rod will go through the appeals.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've had a few appeals in recently. Tondy Road has come in again. It's like bad penny. It sort of keeps on revisiting us. In actual fact, I was explaining at the pre-meeting that the applicant has already resubmitted an application again for very similar development again on this site, even though it hasn't been determined at the appeal stage yet, or hasn't been considered by the inspector. But there is a lot of history on this site. We've refused 3 schemes. 2 appeals have been dismissed. One of them relating to the felling of TPO trees on the site. So yes, it's an interesting one, but obviously it's been refused again. And in actual fact, well, I won't say too much, but another application has come in now for the same scheme on there. There is also an appeal in for a roof top extension in Rest Bay Close in Porthcawl, which we refused for 2 reasons. Likewise, there's a development in Loch Common Road. There used to be a fairly insubstantial bungalow there. That's been demolished under a DPN, but they were looking to put a scheme in there for 10 flats. Various reasons for refusal there. Let's count them. Four reasons for refusal there. So they've appealed that decision, but in the meantime, they have come back in for pre-application advice for a much reduced scheme for 2 houses. And we've had a few decisions as well since we last met, councillors. So we've had a couple of gypsy sites, basically on the opposite side of the road in Rhyw Ceiliog. One was dismissed and one was allowed. So the one that was dismissed was more to do with the landscape and the environment, the ecology. I think it was in a sink. Although the inspector did acknowledge that the 2 sites are not particularly sustainable in terms of their accessibility to alternative modes of transport or even for pedestrians. But that's it. So we've won 1 and lost 1 on that one. And further down, we've got the drive-through facility in Bridgend Retail Park. We refused that originally when that came in as an application on highway grounds. We felt that it's basically separated by the A48 from the main part of the retail park, but it's still allocated as Bridgend Retail Park. And effectively, after carrying out an unaccompanied site visit, the inspector decided that, based on the evidence prepared and submitted and heard at the hearing from all parties, including the occupier on the site at the minute in an unauthorised burger sort of facility, grill facility, that our concerns were not founded, and he decided to allow that appeal. Whether or not Burger King actually end up putting a facility on the site is another matter. But the fact of the matter is that, as a local planning authority and a local highway authority, we refused the scheme on various highways grounds. We don't feel it's very safe for pedestrians to cross there. This facility will attract people to go across from the main retail park across to the Wicks car park. And we don't particularly feel that it's that safe to do so, but the inspector had a different view.
Councillor Griffiths, is this in partnership with what the officer's just speaking about now?
It is, yes, very much.
Right, we'll come in and let's ask the question now then, please.
Well, if I just finish on the, there's another decision as well, enclosure of a effectively front forecourt sort of garden area, and introduction of a new parking area. The inspector agreed with us that that was not acceptable, considering the openness of that particular estate in North Kennelly. So that was a good result from our point of view, and that's it on the appeals.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rod. Councillor Griffiths?
Thank you, Chair. So I'd really like to go a little bit deeper into the Burger King appeal. And I note especially that costs were awarded against us in this case, and the inspector actually found that we had, as a council, acted unreasonably, and that's the reason why they awarded costs. And so I think I've listened very carefully to what Rodri says, and what you said there, Rodri, I don't necessarily disagree with. This is, in our view, still a bad development, but reading through the comments from the appeal, we didn't effectively support our position that it was unsafe. The criticism was not that it was definitely safe to cross the road. It was that we hadn't given sufficient supporting evidence, like a survey or something like that, to warrant our concerns. So I guess what I'd like to ask an open question, which is, as we believe that this is a bad development, what lessons should we learn from this for future similar applications, where we are in danger of having a bad development decision go against us because we haven't necessarily put all the evidence in place? So just an open question, what should we learn from this to avoid this situation happening in the future?
Thank you for that. Rod?
Yes, thanks, Councillor. Councillor, very, very good point. It was a strange set of circumstances in the determination of this application and the appeal process. Effectively, during the application process, we had concerns about the capacity of the network and pedestrian safety crossing from one part of the retail park to the southern end. We expressed that to the applicant. They did not provide any evidence at the application stage to evidence that it was safe and it didn't need improving. We have a feeling that they didn't want to necessarily pay for any improvements to the crossing there. And it got to a point where they provided some information informally. They said, can you consider this? We said, yes, we're willing to have a meeting with you again to discuss this. And at that point, they decided that they would prefer to have a decision. Based on the fact that that information wasn't formally submitted, we made our decision and our reasons for refusal based on effectively the original submissions, and reinstating the fact that we had concerns about that junction. Unfortunately, there are no records of any accidents on that roundabout. Vehicle collisions with pedestrians crossing there. So that we were up against it from that point of view, but because there are no records, it doesn't mean that there could have been incidents, close shaves or whatever you want to call them. They don't get reported. You'd have to have a serious accident to get them reported these days. Between the decision and the hearing, then the applicant then produced more information. One of them was based on, I'm not sure if members are aware of this, but there's a Strava app system which records your, I don't know, your cycle, your runs, your walks, and they use that evidence to show that people do use the crossing at different arms on that roundabout. We asked at the hearing, well, does that pick up slow-moving traffic? So if you're in the passenger seat of a car and your Strava app doesn't necessarily have to be on, but it can still pick it up. Would that take that into account? We didn't receive a real answer to that, but the inspector seemed to take that evidence. The only thing that we could have done potentially was carry out extensive, probably outsourced at cost to the council, a pedestrian survey of that crossing. But our point of view was that attracting more people, especially school kids who go to, at the moment they go to McDonald's, if there's an option for going to Burger King in the future, then they would cross there, and we didn't feel that they were safe. Likewise, on the capacity issues and the traffic levels in that area, they provided some evidence which they could afford to, trying to say that there's enough capacity in the Waterton roundabout and there are no traffic issues down there. And the introduction of a new drive-through in this area wouldn't necessarily attract more traffic to the area. They made the point that it would just give more choice, and people going to this area would either go to McDonald's or go to Burger King. If they saw the McDonald's was busy, they just drive to Burger King. They wouldn't necessarily go there just because it's an attractor or destination as Burger King. We took a different view, and probably amongst the membership, perhaps some people prefer Burger King to a McDonald's. So some people would go there. Some people go up to Sarn Services because they don't want a McDonald's, they prefer Burger King. And they would go further afield if this option was there. But the inspector didn't support us in that view. But in terms of the capacity on that junction, what our main point was in response, and the inspector did ask us for this evidence, and we said, well, effectively that evidence is in the public domain as part of the LDP review. It is there on record. The appellant and the applicant would have been able to see that as part of the LDP documents, and it tailors it to this junction. The inspector unfortunately felt that it was outdated and was a borough-wide strategic transport assessment rather than an individual assessment of these junctions, roundabouts. But it all feeds into the borough-wide one. So it's unfortunate that whilst he took that evidence on board, he put more weight in the evidence of the appellant. The other issue that we had at the hearing, more than anything, that obviously there's an interested party on the site at the minute, and she's concerned that her business would be lost because this application site is on the site of her current burger van. So she was an interested party along with the local ward member who made quite good representations supporting our view that it would not be safe for pedestrians to cross here and to encourage crossings there. And people probably would not use it because they feel that it wouldn't be safe. So that's all they do. They'd shun active travel, and they'd jump in their car in, I don't know, outside home base still there? Outside home base, jump in their car, and rather than walk to this facility, the new takeaway, hot food takeaway, they'd actually jump in their car, drive across, park it outside the facility and go in. So that's not doing much for active travel. So, and which is supported by national policy. But at the hearing itself, if I point you to paragraph 8 of the decision on page 86 of the agenda, the inspector says, he talks about the Strava heat map, which we had never seen before, and obviously supported the appellant's view that people do use these arms. But at the end of that paragraph, he says, at the hearing, the owner of an existing catering van on the Wicks car park reported that shoppers regularly parked in Wick's car park and walked to the Home Bargains store on the northern side of the A48. She attended the hearing from the car park and reported that in one 20-minute period during the hearing, she witnessed 7 people cross the A48. To be fair to her, I think in her mind she was trying to help our case to prove that people use that crossing, and she was trying to support us in the fact that they use it, but it's not very safe. Unfortunately, without accident data or any data of that sort, that backfired, because the inspector obviously took the view that, oh well, there's hundreds of people crossing there now and there's been no accidents, it can't be that unsafe, it must be okay. But our contention was that nobody really walks that way. I've never seen anyone park in Wicks and walk across to Home Bargains. You wouldn't want to, for starters, but you would park in Home Bargains and do your shopping and go on your merry way. But to be fair to her, in support of her, I suppose, I think she was trying to help our case in many ways by saying that people use it and use it regularly, but that backfired. So it didn't help us. It was actually shot us in the foot with our argument. So it's a difficult one, but we'll have to take it on the chin now. In terms of going forward, it's going to make it difficult for us now to refuse developments such as this on active travel grounds, pedestrian safety grounds, because I think the inspector took the view, well, it's allocated as a Bridgend retail park, it's inherently sustainable, and it's safe to cross. Needless to say, we didn't agree with that, but unfortunately we cannot challenge that decision unless it's on a point of law through the courts, and we have had to take that decision on the chin. So in terms of going forward, you're right, Councillor, it's going to make it difficult for us to refuse similar types of schemes on these grounds now. Even for the lady who's promised to move her burger van closer to the Wicks entrance, she at the minute it's an unauthorised development, but if she moved it, she would have to have planning permission now, and it would be difficult for us on the basis of this inspector's decision to actually say no, it's not sustainable, it's not safe for pedestrians to access your burger van, and we wouldn't be able to really, based on this inspector's decision, refuse that development on those grounds. Needless to say, we were very disappointed with the decision, and not least the decision on the costs, because as far as we were concerned, our concerns were valid. We were not at any point unreasonable during the course of the appeal hearing. But as with the decision, is something that we're going to have to take on the chin. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mark John, can you just hang on a second, please? I know you're first in line, but Jonathan's got his hands up, and I take it he's going to answer this question. Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to sort of add on to Rodri's point there, I think this just highlights the need for evidence when we make planning decisions, and everything is evidence-based. When members ask for or raise concerns about traffic generation, well, clearly that decision, the lesson learned for us is that those reasons for refusal or potential reasons for refusal must be evidenced. It's no good to say, or we think that there's too much traffic in the area, or we think that there's too much congestion. We got to have evidence to say that that's the case, and that having an additional use there is going to make that situation worse. I'm disappointed with the result. I personally don't think we've acted unreasonably, but there was an issue where late evidence was submitted. Yeah, I come back to the usual situation We are not resourced internally to provide that special evidence. We have to rely very heavily on external consultants. As it happens, we did employ somebody on an agency basis, an experienced officer, to provide that evidence, but it was quite short notice. That's the only thing we could do. Now, developers, multinational developers, they can mobilize this type of work, this type of evidence and specialist input at very, very short notice. They can throw a lot more money at this than we can. So that's the unfortunate position. It's a very rare occurrence. And to my knowledge, we've only had 2 costs awards against us over the last decade, which isn't too bad, I don't think. It's not a pleasant place to be and not a pleasant place to report this back to members. I'm not particularly happy to do that. But I believe that we did defend the case as best as possible. But as for lessons learned, it's just that we're going to have to be very mindful, particularly when we're talking about issues such as traffic and congestion and highway safety. We're going to have to get our facts right before we make those decisions, and I will have to keep coming back to members on that and saying, well, if you're not happy with this, you're going to have to evidence that. I mean, we haven't settled the cost award yet, but it's going to be quite substantial, and that money comes out of our budget, which, as I mentioned before, we don't have much of a budget. It's not a good place to be, but I'm certain that we will learn from this and move forward. But yeah, I don't like reporting this to members, but there we are. But thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Councillor John, for being patient. Can you do you want to ask your question now, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd firstly just like to say I'm totally behind Rodri and the planning department for turning the Burger King application down, and for the reasons that basically been stated. But having gone through the paperwork, on page 94, paragraph 8, and the conclusion, could I have Rodri and Jonathan Parsons' thoughts on that, please? Paragraph 8, page 94, and the conclusion, please. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rod.
Yeah, Councillor, have you got a particular comment on that paragraph, or do you just want us to
it's just sorry.
Paragraph 8, do you say, on page 94?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just that it's coming across as totally unreasonable behaviour on both substantive and procedural grounds. I find it a bit confusing.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Effectively, if I go back a bit, I think it's at the start of that costs, paragraph 2.
On what page, Rod?
Page 93, paragraph 2 at the start.
Okay.
Halfway through, at the end, the last sentence of paragraph 2, as the evidence is material to the determination of the appeal, I accepted it, and the appellant was given time to respond. So he accepted the, albeit late, supporting evidence, but it was evidence that the inspector had actually asked for at the hearing. We took the view that it was on public record, like I mentioned earlier, but we made that explicit in our costs response. Unfortunately, he still felt that even though he accepted that evidence and factored it into his decision making, he felt that it was unreasonable, even though he'd requested it. It was unreasonable for us to provide it later on and as a late representation. Which bit of an anathema to me, but especially as it was on public record and is there for all to see. If it was something that we just knocked up in the days after the hearing before we resubmitted the cost rebuttal, then yes, I'd understand it. But as we were making it clear that evidence is there on file and there for the applicant to look at and factor into their assessment of that junction, it was a bit galling to see that he felt that that was unreasonable behaviour, but that is the decision, and we have to live and die by that, unfortunately. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. I assume you mean this Councillor Williams, but three simple questions really. Whilst the costs are still being confirmed, could an officer give the committee an indication of the quantum? So are we talking 4 figures, 5 figures? What sort of number are we talking about here? The scale of the costs. The second question is are officers absolutely assured, whilst there was some last minute information came in, we knew we were going into battle effectively against a very large corporate body. Are we absolutely assured that we were as prepared as we could have been for this? And given some of the comments made today about our feelings of disappointment, is there an appetite to appeal this through the courts? Thanks.
On the first question, Councillor, yes, we have received the costs in terms of the invoices submitted to the applicant by the consultants. It is £28,500. Sorry, I didn't hear that. £28,500. Well, just under £29,000. We are, don't want to say too much, we're in the process of challenging that on various grounds. There's a feeling that some of those costs are not reasonable in terms of the hours spent on dealing with our cost rebuttal. But I won't say too much about that. In terms of our preparation for the hearing, it's probably best for me to say that the case officer that was dealt with the refusal left the authority to join Cardiff County Council for effectively a promotion and more money. So she was not available to us to carry on with the hearing. In terms of our highways expertise, we did have, at the time of the decision, 2 officers that left the authority to join the private sector. So that wasn't available to us to deal with the appeal and the appeal hearing. Apart from the fact that one officer has come back to us, but he only came back to us for various HR complications, only came back to us on the day before the hearing. So preparation for the hearing was not the best, mainly because of the lack of resources, because the resources had been lost to the private sector and to another authority. So in terms of going forward on that, in effect, by losing those officers, I suppose you can make an argument that during that time we saved money in salaries to those officers, but that would be a stretch. It is what it was. It was the perfect storm in terms of this one and this particular site. We still thought that we had a good case, especially on the fact that we dealt with we made the decision on the basis of the evidence that they submitted at that stage. Unfortunately, with an appeal process, as long as it's not amended plans, the appellant can provide much more supporting information. For some reason, they decided to use a Strava heat map to prove the pedestrian flows. If they'd done a proper pedestrian flow count and survey, perhaps they would have come up with something different. That is conjecture. Likewise, on the system that they used to survey pedestrian movements in that area, they used a very particular survey technique that is used in England, but mainly in London. So it's in areas of London which are highly supported by active travel, lots of street furniture, and issues like that. So what our case was they should have used the Welsh guidance for a Welsh local planning authority in a Welsh context, rather than use a system that is more relevant and related to a London borough, for example. The inspector didn't agree with that point of view. He felt that the PERS system that they used was more comprehensive than the Welsh government advised route of surveying this process. So it's that was disappointing in itself, but we didn't get many breaks on this all the way through, unfortunately, and even along the lines of supporting evidence from people that are on the site. So we were up against it from the very start, and it was pretty obvious to me. I'm not sure how Rob felt, but it was pretty obvious to me that the inspector felt that it was wholly acceptable, and as long as he could cross that A48 safely, he felt that anyone could. So it's a difficult one for us to swallow, but that's what we'll have to do. I think that was what was the last question, Councillor, of the three?
Yeah, my last point was given some of the comments made about our perception that not that the inspector was being unreasonable, but
Oh, yes.
we felt that he was incorrect in his assessment. Do we want to back ourselves as an authority and challenge this through the courts?
No. It would have to be in a very particular point of law that we could only take him to the courts. In our mind, he has run roughshod over national planning policy, but that is his, for want of a better word, right to do so. It's his decision as the final arbiter on this as an inspector. But it would be very difficult for us to pick out a particular matter or point of law that he's erred on, and the cost that we've been stung with on this one would be magnified quite a bit if we did go down that route, and I'm not sure if we would have a position legally to be able to do that anyway. Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Williams, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a little bit. I'm going to ask our solicitor to come in and make a comment on that.
Yeah, so thanks for the tip. Roderick Jones, solicitor and senior lawyer, advisor to this committee. Yes, on a specific question of appealing against the decision of an inspector, Councillor, you can do it. It goes to a high court, but you've got to be able to show a point of law. And to break that down a little bit more, when it comes to these sorts of decisions, we either got to show that the inspector failed to take something into account that they should have taken into account, whether that be, policy or some specific evidence. Alternatively, that they took into account something they shouldn't have taken into account. And the other one, which you can maybe run in this sort of case, is that they reached a decision no reasonable inspector could have reached. So those are broadly, that's the sort of things you're looking for to challenge an inspector's decision. It can be done. There's plenty of case law about it. I've been involved in a few successful ones myself over the years. On the other hand, often enough, it's unsuccessful. It's not the easiest thing to do, because as I say, the fact that we think what we would think was as a bad decision, that's not good enough on its own. So that's the issues about going to the court. Rodney's mentioned costs. I mean, in the court, of course, costs tend to follow the event. So if we were to challenge and be successful, then we should recover the costs of that particular court challenge. Of course, the other side of that coin is, if we were to challenge and be unsuccessful, then we would be paying extra costs to, well, Welsh ministers, basically, because that's who you're going to be challenging, or Pedw. And with the inspectors, if they chose to defend his decision. So that's an outline of it. There are time limits on it anyway, and this decision, I can't see, what was the date of the decision letter? Oh, 11th of April. So I should think, are we still in time? We're probably just about still in time, but it's not something you can do, you know, beyond a certain time, you lose the right to challenge anyway. So that's just a summary of that, hopefully helpful for members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Rod. I'm going to now ask Jonathan Parsons to come in before I call in Councillor Easterbrook. Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm aware there's a number of hands up, so I'm not going to take up too much time because Rodri and Rod have explained the situation quite well. But all I will say, Chair, is that we defended this decision in the best way that we could with the means and the resource that we had. Believe that professionally we did a good job of defending that. It's unfortunately the inspector's decision. It's contrary to what it was, and what it comes down to is a difference of professional opinion, and that happens quite often. It happens quite frequently. We do report appeals to committee where the inspector has not agreed with the council's case, and this happened in this particular occasion. And it's unfortunate that there was a cost award as well. So this is one inspector's decision. I don't think it's a critique of our general performance as a planning unit. I think it's one of these things we're just going to have to accept and move on. But as been mentioned before, we need to look at whether there's any lessons that we can learn from this. And when we do make decisions, we're going to have the right evidence, as I mentioned previously. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Easterbrook, please.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points, and I'll be quick. Not wishing to criticise our officers who are professionals. I certainly respect them for the work they do. I sympathise that as a department they are under-resourced. Does worry me a little bit. I had my training back in January and was told, albeit in 2 hours, you can't learn all of planning law. But I was told that planning is based on planning law. Not totally black and white, but it is according to planning law. So something is either admissible or it isn't. If I think about, again today, that I've sat here and listened to more lessons, attending planning meetings, I'm having more lessons than I actually are in sort of member training. So it's certainly good to be part of this committee that we seem to be learning a lot of lessons. And I hope that we do learn from lessons, because this last one seems to be an expensive mistake. I think that the old saying is, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And so the officers are having to deal with reapplications all the time because these developers are certainly not letting it lie. I think if they were to amend the plans and in accordance to what the officers want to get it through, then yes, something should pass. My one concern is if we start becoming wary as a planning department of actually refusing planning permission, then a lot more will actually get pushed through. And to me, that goes against a little bit of training that I had, that it's not black and white. And I think that developers are knowing that we are under-resourced, certainly from an enforcement point of view as well. So if I think about the appeal that we were just talking about, I don't think that I would want to walk along that A48. I don't think that I would like to cycle on that A48. And whether it's coming out of Plaza or around those roundabouts, there is already intensification of units there. I find it very difficult to pull out of those junctions in a vehicle. No mind thinking of hopping out and running around the roundabouts. So it's been an interesting morning, and I hope that we don't have any more expensive lessons to learn. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Easterbrook. Rod?
Yeah, good points, Councillor. I think you're right. It is not black and white. There are many grey shades in planning. What I would say is it wouldn't necessarily put us off having the same view on the same scheme, even though, you know, two different sites have got completely different contexts, and you have to deal with each one on its own individual merits. But I can see what you mean. Would it put us off refusing this or a similar scheme to this on the same grounds in the future? But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. The only thing is with this decision, even though we don't talk about precedents as such, but if there is a form of case law that allows this sort of thing, then we'd have to take that into account, and we'd have to balance our chances of success at appeal if we did refuse something like this in the future. But in many cases, Councillor, we might win an appeal, i.e. the appeal is dismissed, but in that decision of the inspector they might explain, well, it's not acceptable in its current form, but if they did X, Y and Z, it would be acceptable in my view. So when they reapply and they take into account that X, Y and Z, it is very difficult for us then to stick to our guns and still refuse it if even if we're still not 100% certain that it's acceptable. If they've carried out what the inspectors suggested would make a particular scheme acceptable from being unacceptable, then we would be remiss in refusing that at the secondary application stage. So that sometimes gets lost in the ether sometimes. But yes, our main worry with this one, I suppose, is the fact that he hasn't put as much store into Planning Policy Wales and the encouragement to make users walk or actively travel to places rather than jump in their cars. But we will still, if a developer comes to us and specifically quotes this decision in relation to their particular development, then we will still fight it if we feel that the development is not contributing to active travel and the modal shift. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that answer. Councillor Griffiths, please.
Thank you, Chair. I got two points. I'll make one very quickly. I am surprised by the amount of opinion that the inspectors put into this particular response, and I hope there's actually there's no real precedent set here, set in this judgment, because it seems to be more opinion than anything else. I think that's supportive of what the officer said. But the wider point I want to make here is that that particular development as a whole, and actually many developments over that period, were originally designed to be car-centric. I personally have used that a lot, and it's almost impossible to walk from one shop to another there. And in fact, I'm pretty sure that the shop owners put fences in place and put humps in the pavement, so they discourage you from walking. There's no encouragement to walk from one shop to another across that shopping estate. And I think we have designated a retail park effectively with a main dual carriageway running through the centre of it. So the broader point here, I think, is that very many of our shopping areas were originally designed for cars and took no account of anybody walking from shop to shop. And for people like myself who try to park in one place and then visit 4 shops, it's virtually impossible. So I think the broader point that I'd like us to pick up here is active travel is not just about putting the long footpaths along dual carriageways. Active travel really needs to include changing our environment to be putting people first and people before cars. So I think the original sin here, if you like, was designing a shopping centre which didn't allow you to walk between the shops. And I think that's the main point I'd like us all to take away from this, which is any future development, we shouldn't only be thinking about cars, we should be putting people and residents first. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Rod?
Yeah, I'll quickly come back on that. That's a good point. Yes, it's a pre-existing condition with the retail park. It's very much of its time. But national planning policy was completely different then. If we'd have refused that retail park on the grounds that you couldn't walk across from Tesco easily to whatever was there before, Pets at Home or whatever, then we'd have been laughed out of the place. But that's the whole point. The emphasis has changed. Planning Policy Wales 11 since February 2021 now is putting the onus on new developments to actually put in active travel routes before anything else. So before they develop, so they've got to put that is the primary element. And whilst okay, it's on a allocated retail park, fair enough, but it's still a new development. There's nothing really on that side unless you want to walk to a car wash or walk to Wickes store, which you would only be able to carry a few bricks away with you. Effectively what I'm saying is you drive to those places now on the southern side of the A48. There's nothing there really apart from KFC, I suppose, on the other arm and further up to entice you across or potentially walk there. Unfortunately, with the local comprehensive school, we are aware of the fact that lots of the kids from there, they go along the A48, take their lives in their own hands, really, crossing the petrol forecourt station. But when they get to McDonald's, at least they don't have to cross the A48. In this instance, they will be very much encouraged to cross there because KFC will be there. So they will make a beeline for there, but whether or not it's safe from our point of view to cross there is another matter, and we don't think it is safe in its current form without improvements, which we were seeking Burger King to carry out, and even minimal stuff that we were suggesting, like setting the site back to allow a better pedestrian and cycle access, even if it's just for staff to get into the facility. That was completely overridden by the inspector as well. So we didn't gain any wins on this one. So it's a difficult one to take, but it is what it is. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you for that answer. Councillor Martin Hughes, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Rodri's mentioned the initial claim that's been made of 28.5k, and clearly there'll be a period where that will be negotiated, and we'll see where that goes. At the end of the day, if there is a failure to agree on the costs, and it's referred to the Senior Costs Court Office, could Rodri just explain what that process would involve? Is that going to be an objective desktop exercise, or would we have to commit additional staff to attend a hearing, for example? And who would, at the end of the day, who would be responsible for paying those court costs? Thank you.
Yes, really good question, Councillor. Like John mentioned earlier, we don't have much experience of this, so it's very rare that we do get costs against us, even though lots of people try to claim costs. They think that it's a way of penalising the authority for refusing something, even though the costs can only be entered into for the work that they've carried out from the appeal process onwards, not from during the application stage. But in this instance, we do have the option, if we can't agree. I'm challenging some of the inputs, the temptation. No, I won't say too much. It's basically We feel that there are elements of the invoices that are not reasonable in terms of the time spent, 16 hours and 10 hours on putting together the rebuttal to our cost rebuttal. To my mind's eye is excessive, but if we don't get to a point where we agree it, we have the option of going to the senior court's cost office. There's a cost involved with that, just sending it to that cost office. But and there's obviously, if in the case that the senior court's cost office agrees with the appellant in terms of the costs incurred during the appeal process, and we have to pay it, then there might be other costs that we have to pay. So we'd have to take a view on that. But Rod, I think, has got more information on that, more specific information on to that answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Rod. Yeah, just Councillor, I think you asked about process. Certainly my experience of doing this sort of thing, not in Bridgend, but in other authorities. At this stage, it's a discussion and negotiation. You try and agree the costs. You can go back and should go back if you're not happy with rates or time spent in, say, either you're overcharging per hour or whatever, or you should never have needed that many hours. If you can reach an agreement, obviously, then the council would pay the costs at that stage. Beyond that, we can't be forced to pay any costs without the action by the appellant, and their action would be to make this a judgment of the High Court. That's a matter for them, but if you can't agree, that's the way forward. From that time, whenever the High Court issued it as a judgment, that is simply, it's a straightforward application so to do. From that time forward, interest becomes payable. At this stage, interest isn't payable on their costs. And then if it ended up in a hearing, a cost hearing, as you mentioned, I can only describe my experience of this because that of itself is a very specialist legal, what's the word, technique, if you like, and approach. And whenever I've been involved, the council has appointed what you call costs draftsman, which is basically a person who's expert in that field, and they would then assess the bill and give the council's detailed refutation of whatever's in the bill that's been presented to the court. And eventually, as you say, there'd be a hearing on that. So if you succeed, if you were to succeed in getting the bill reduced, you'd be looking for your costs of the process. But it is, of course, ultimately by an expert cost judge, if you like, and they would assess it. So again, hopefully that's sort of useful information.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you for waiting patiently, Councillor Pratt. Your question.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really would question the Strava heat map. I'm currently been doing a crash course in it, so I'm grateful for the time waiting on my question. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is probably a legal question over whether Strava can be effectively used rather than a pedestrian survey. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. I'm looking at Wix as it stands, and it's saying there's no activity data there at all whatsoever. So I don't know whether they've been conned or not. But I mean, I would be in the mind, if I was there as an officer, I probably would have thrown my papers in the air and gone for a strong drink afterwards after hearing that Strava's being used. But there we are. I just wondered whether there is an arm in law that really questions whether Strava is as accurate as they claimed it to be, and whether they really should be using proper studies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that question, Rod.
I'm not sure of any particular legal authority on this at the moment, Councillor, but I think the essential issue really is that you know, it's for an inspector who's a very experienced person to assess the reasonableness and the weight, if you like, of the evidence presented to him or her. And I must admit, I was rather surprised reading this decision myself. You know, lawyers aren't involved with the hearings to save costs. So, you know, these are with the officers, the appellant and the inspector, but really it's rather surprising, I would say. We discussed earlier about trying to get a decision overturned. Whether a court would say it was completely unreasonable of the inspector to rely on that evidence is another matter. If we were trying to do that, then we would have to see if there are any, we'd have to do some research into trying to put that argument, if you follow me, to say, you know, just how reliable is this stuff, you know. But at a hearing like this, it is for the inspector to decide what weight, or if you like, credibility they give to any particular evidence presented to them. So the question was he unreasonable in so doing? Okay.
Something there. That is a good point about Strava. I'm not on Strava myself. I don't know what proportion of the population are on Strava, but they seem to indicate that lots of people are crossing those arms. But at the time that study was undertaken, there is no active travel route on the northern part on the Home Bargain side of that carriageway. So there's obviously no one walking there because you'd be walking in the road. So you'd have to cross to get on the pavement on the opposite side. And it was strange at the hearing because obviously the active travel route that's gone in, the inspector quite rightfully said, well, what if you felt that this crossing is not safe, why didn't you improve it as part of the wider active travel improvements there? But from our point of view, at that point, because we'd refused the scheme, there was nothing proposed for the opposite side of the carriageway that would entice people to cross. So what is the point of improving a crossing that's not going to be used by pedestrians, if you know what I mean? So it's because we only get X amount from the Welsh Government match funding for active travel. So I can imagine what the answer would have been if we'd have said, oh, can we have a signalised junction or something there to crossroads or whatever there to support this active travel route, on the off chance that some people might want to walk to Wicks or the car wash. It was difficult to sort of bite the tongue of the hearing, but it is what it is, and unfortunately the inspector's taken a view, rightfully or wrongly, that it's a safe crossing there. You can cross two lanes and another lane on the opposite side of the island quite safely, and there shouldn't be any issues. And I just want the general public to understand that we did refuse this. We never supported this application. And I think the impression out there, the council has allowed it, and I just wish people would actually read up on the detail and understand that it was another party that has actually allowed it, not us. We actually were not supportive of this, and it's one of those things, but it'll probably come back on us anyway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. I can't see anybody else wanting to ask any questions. Can somebody formally move we note this, please?
I vote we noted.
I'll second. Thank you for that. Training log. The next one is Welsh Water on the 14th of June. I hope everybody can attend that. There's a few after that. Building in conversation areas, enforcement, PEDU, public rights of way, tree policy, Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, Commissioner. So we've got a lot going on. Can somebody formally move we note that, please? Second.
Third.
Thank you. And under item 13, I have no urgent items, so I'll formally close the meeting and thank everybody for attending today. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye-bye.